Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Breakouts, a podcast where we interview extraordinary founders in just under 20 minutes. I'm your host, Akkshay Khoslaa. Now, you'll find many podcasts out there that are 2 to 3 hours long and interview these wildly successful founders after they've already made it big. But by that point, the founders are already 5, 10, or even 15 years into their journey, so their insights just aren't as actionable anymore. We're doing things a little bit different. We're interviewing founders that are on the cusp of breaking out so that you can learn the playbooks they're using to build category-defining companies today. And we're doing it in just under 20 minutes. Now, just before we get started, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at The Breakouts Pod, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and join our Discord community for aspiring founders. The link is in the description below. And I think that's everything I have for you. So without further ado, here's today's guest. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Breakouts. We have with us once again for part 2 now, Jeff Wilson, the co-founder and CEO of Jupe. Now, Jeff recently raised a $9.5 million seed round for his company Jupe, and he's planning to build something big. In part 1, he shared with us what's the story behind Jupe, what is his personal story, and how he thinks about creating this new category. In this part 2 episode, we're going to focus on strategies, tactics, and hacks that Jeff has used to build his business. We're going to talk about 4 main sections. So the episode is going to be carved up into 4 parts. The first part is going to be about product and how Jeff thinks about making product decisions and building conviction in his product. The second part is going to be about distribution, how he thinks about acquiring users. The third is going to be fundraising, any fundraising tips that he has to share with you all. And the last is going to be about operationalizing his business. So how he makes sure that his team works efficiently and can achieve their goals. So to get us started right here, Jeff, and pleasure to have you back on the pod.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing, for our listeners that might have missed the first episode, what Jupe is and what it does, just in a few sentences to recap for us?
Yeah, so Jupe provides all the software and all the infrastructure to drag and drop a village or a hotel on a raw piece of land in a single day.
Awesome. Really cool. And folks, if you're curious, definitely check them out at jupe.com. I think their website does a great job of visualizing this for you. And definitely go and listen to part 1 to understand the product a little bit better. Now, Jeff, to get this episode started off, let's start by talking about product. I think one question that I have for you, early stage entrepreneurs, when they're trying to figure out which problem to solve, they'll sometimes experience a problem in their day-to-day life, or they'll hear about it, or they'll learn about it. But there'll be a process in getting them to the point where, hey, they think they have 80 to 90% conviction in not just a problem, but a solution to solve it before they go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to dive all into this. I'm curious, what was that process for you?
That process was very centered for me on people, right? And a specific kind of person, right? I don't remember where I heard this first, but the advice went something to the effect of, if enough other people that are respected by other people think it's a good idea, then it's probably worth at least trying. And okay. The way that person was calling me out without calling me out was saying that I wasn't necessarily respected by enough other people, but if I could find other respected people that respected the idea, then fine. So let me give you an example of kind of how this happened with Jupe. Very early formulations of the idea, when it looked almost nothing like it looked today, I just began calling everybody that I knew that was respected in the industry, but also people I didn't know that were respected in the industry, and people that were respected that had nothing to do with the industry or startups. Smart people that were generally respected in their field. And I went and sat down and had our conversations with 50 of them. And got some amazing insights, not only from the people in the industry, but from my aunt, who is a law professor, right, at the University of Texas. Had some very interesting ideas on our go-to-market, and she knows nothing about capitalism or startups. She thinks a safe is a thing like in a wall that you turn a combination on. So yeah, I think that is a really good process, especially at the very early formative times of the idea to begin to dial it. And it's free, right? It's free.
Awesome. So really go out and talk to people, talk to everyone, and have in-depth conversations that can get you the learnings that you need to build conviction. And then also try to convince people that you think are respected in the field to have some backing behind the idea. Is that a fair way to sum it up?
Yeah, and then I would say the next step of this, right, and is then once you begin to create things, very rapidly closing that loop of the product. Generally, like one of the kind of YC mantras, right, is like develop the product, talk to customers, develop the product, talk to customers. Like that's all you should be doing, is closing that loop as fast as possible. Well, it's a similar idea here. It's like develop the idea, talk to the respected ones, right? Talk to the network, develop the idea, and you can go back to these people more than once, right? And you will begin to get the general shape and vector of what the right idea at least probably is by doing that.
I like that analogy. I like the way that you formulated it. That's really cool. Another product question I have for you is, in the previous episode, you mentioned that, hey, there's all these cool things that you can do. You talked about potentially getting Jupe to the point where, hey, it could be fully automatically set up. You talked about, hey, we could put it in rivers. And there is genuinely so much to do, especially when you're in this journey of creating a new space. I'm curious, though, how do you go about prioritizing all these efforts that you could place your time into and picking which is the first one to tackle for us right now, which is the biggest priority?
Yeah, I guess a couple of thoughts on that. So I think entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, underestimate the pure like just tsunami of decisions you have to make. So in any one particular product, I know just from like a hard tech, a product standpoint, you're making about 10,000 decisions, right? Some of them very big, some of them very large. So this becomes a pretty important exercise. What we did was, I guess we narrowed down to even 10 different use cases. These were different things besides sleeping in a Jupe and growing weed in a Jupe, right? Or getting on a Peloton in a Jupe. We did some market research on the size of those markets. And then we just tried to sell a few of those different things with renders. When we didn't even have them, we didn't even know how to make them, right? And so, it was one of those things of, hey, make something and pretend it's real, right? And see if someone will buy it.
The Steve Jobs approach.
And without being dishonest, right? To date, I have sold 3 greenhouses. 3 Jupe greenhouses. I sold quite a while back, and I sold a lot of other types of Jupes, which is into what we ended up building. I told that person I sold those greenhouses to, hey, I'll just use this first initial, G. We will get you those greenhouses one day, right? Even though we haven't delivered them. So that really helped us sort out. I mean, you find out pretty quick when people start wanting to pay for something, if that's something that you should start going after.
Interesting. I love that. So what you're saying is, before you go ahead and invest time in a new feature or maybe even a new product in your product line, you should go and ask people whether they'd be willing to pay for it. And if not in a dishonest manner, maybe even try pre-selling it.
Try selling it. Try either pre-selling it or selling it, and put a date on it when you're going to deliver that you're really going to have to hustle towards, right?
There you go.
I think one other thing I'll say, and this, you may have mentioned this a few times on the podcast, that I learned second time around a little bit better at least, is that generally adding features to what you're already doing is not the solution, especially if they're features you think you need. Often deleting features is what will get you sort of to the promised land of product market fit rather than just continuously adding them. So I think it's a thing we fell into that I see a lot of my compatriots and see myself doing a lot of times when something's not working, we just start adding features. I don't know why we do that, but it's generally not a really good idea.
I love that call out. And I think what it really goes into is that I think founders need to be cognizant of the cognitive load that new products have when users are onboarding. And if you have too many features, their mind share is spread across all of them. And they're not really focusing on the one that's the main feature that drives 90% of the value. And that's the one you should be doubling down on. So I love that call out. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about distribution. What if you had to articulate your current user acquisition strategy just at a high level? What would you say are like the major channels?
Yeah, it's interesting. Our initial major channels was just a few press pieces. We had a couple of early press pieces that generated nearly 1,000 leads for land partners, which is a lot of people wanting to give up their land, right, to do this. We've recently moved into doing a lot of stuff regionally with Google on just, I would like to get into TikTok, but we have not quite figured that out yet.
Jeff, you were so charismatic, you would kill it on TikTok.
All right, man. Maybe we'll have a little side hustle.
There you go. So right now, so you mentioned that you're getting started with paid ads on Google as one channel. Who are the people that you really need to acquire? It's these landowners, right? It's not the actual.
Yeah, it's both sides, right? So
both sides.
I mean,
okay.
We're doing a really easy thing here. We're creating a software startup, a hardware startup, and a dual-sided marketplace.
Oh boy.
Why not? Right?
Super easy, right?
Why not? Just choose, I was just talking about not adding features. Why don't you just add entire different business models and entire different businesses all together? Now, what this will create if we're successful is a Tesla type business, right? People wondered why a car company would need AI, machine learning, and cameras and software and a onboard compiling computer. That's the stupidest thing anybody's ever done, right? On a car, right? There was a time when people said that.
Right.
And so we're trying to do essentially something similar with Jupe. And on the marketplace side, we are not only, driving supply, which will be our landowners where we can drop these, but we're driving demand, which are people staying in the Jupes, right? So we don't get paid unless people sleep in those Jupes because it's a rev share deal. So we've both got our own website, which we can push traffic to through Google, other places, but we're also using folks like Airbnb, booking.com to sort of funnel through leads to our website.
I love that. I think two really intelligent pieces that play out here is that, hey, on the demand side, you're using Airbnb, which already has a lot of eyeballs, to direct them over to your bookings. Same with all these other platforms. So you're going where your customers already are.
That's right.
And then when it comes to the supply side, when you have a rev share in place here, right? The people that own the land also have a financial incentive to have your Jupes on their property. Then they're also kind of on the line to maybe even advertise about them. Tell people that, hey, these Jupes are available. So I love the incentives that you've set up here. And I love that you're meeting users where they already are.
Yeah. And I mean, you pay for that, right? You pay for meeting them where they are, right? There's a tax. And, Airbnb, I think it's like a 17% tax that we're paying essentially to bring folks over, but worth it, right? I mean, they've got the distribution. Good on them. We'll try to build our own. That's what it's about.
So whenever we discuss marketplaces, I think one thing that's crucial to talk about is your moat, right?
Yeah.
How do you think about that moat? Because right now, let's say you're acquiring users from Airbnb. At some point, you're going to want to say that, hey, I want users to actually be on our platform, and I don't want other competitors to be able to steal them away from us. How do you think about that moat strategy?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to be around just having a really freaking awesome experience, right? Reckon it back to Tesla a bit there as well, right? If you can walk into your Jupe at any Jupe site, anywhere in the world, and your Spotify immediately clicks on, right? If it knows the light settings that are going to help you sleep the best, right? There are some things there that you can get nowhere else. sort of like the things you can get in a Tesla that you really can't get anywhere else. And then there's an ecosystem of those where you walk into these anywhere in the world. I think we can begin to build some loyalty around the depth of that experience, and then build some community around it as well. Like we have secret mezcal bars at a couple of our sites, right?
No way.
I don't think that is a thing. Like when you go to every campsite that start poking around and looking for the secret mezcal bar, because there's probably one somewhere hidden on this site, right? It's those kind of things. And then you're going to want to bring friends to show them this, right? So I think it's about, using the technology and the sort of nimbleness we have to, build a really unique experience unlike anything else, right? Because in the end, it's all about user experience, right? And if you can build something like Quantum Leap different, then you've got something.
That's awesome. I love that. Sometimes building the best possible experience is the best strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. I love our conversation about distribution. Let's move on and talk about fundraising. So fundraising is one of those things that, especially for first-time entrepreneurs, is a bit of a challenge. And I know that you guys went through YC and fundraised before and also after that, right? So I'm curious, based off of your personal journey with fundraising, what's one unconventional fundraising tip that you might provide to our aspiring entrepreneurs that are listening to the show?
A couple of things. I'm going to give one very good question and then one. We'll see if people like the advice on pitch decks. I would ask every person that has raised money that you meet the story about their first check. How did you get your first check? And tell me that story. Because a lot of these stories are freaking crazy. I mean, I got my first check for the dumpster in a dirty tavern in East Austin. I won't talk about the dumpster actually had funding, and the dumpster, listen to episode 1 if you want to know what I'm talking about. And then for my first check for my first startup, I actually got in a men's room. I'm not shitting you. The very first check, or at least I made the
That's
ask.
crazy.
And, I'll tell you why. Not only will it be an interesting story, you might learn something, but it's probably going to endear yourself, right? Endear yourself to that person a bit, because people love telling those stories. It's so hard to get those first checks. So I think ask everybody that, right? That's just a very simple thing, I think. And then the second thing is my pitch decks have now become, very simple formula. 99-point font. And I never go less than 70-point font. Emojis, photos, and graphs. In a seed deck, I raised $9.5 million on that formula, right? With nothing smaller than probably 55, 60 point. Because what you're doing, especially in the seed stage, is you want the story to flow, and you don't want anyone to ever have to really read. They should almost intuit those words off the page. And so I think if you set those lower limits of like how small the text can go, it's a lot harder to write a pitch deck in 70-point font than it is in 20 or 30. It's a lot harder.
I love that. I think that's very actionable. If you start off by putting this constraint on you, some of the best work in your life is going to happen based on constraints. That's great. Let's go ahead and talk about our last section here, right as we wrap up. So, Jeff, you're building a business which seems very challenging on many fronts, right? You're building a marketplace. You got to gather suppliers. You got to gather demand. You're building software. You're building hardware. I'm curious, how do you make this whole operation run efficiently? What is like maybe one strategy or hack that you use that our aspiring entrepreneurs could learn from?
So, a couple of things. Every all hands meeting, and they're about 25 minutes, they're not long, once a week, we reiterate why we're really doing this, right? What the big mission is. And some twist, right? A conversation that I had that week about refugees in Kenya. Right. It really is important to remember, at least every once in a while, remind yourself that there's a reason you're doing this, because it's too freaking hard if you don't. And then I think tying a really good set of kind of operating principles to that. And we actually do our sort of quarterly reviews around that mission and the sort of principles and values. Rate people directly to those, right? Rather than just kind of performance metric goals. So I think those things, I mean, you've got to really be into what you're doing long term, because it's too freaking hard. You'll give up, right? Even if there's a lot of money in it, you'll give up. So I think that first part of it's really important.
I feel that. So constantly align your teammates to your vision, right?
Yeah. And it's not even constantly. Do it once a week, right?
Yeah, like, there you go.
You know, bring it back, because it just becomes annoying, right? There's that founder guy or gal too who's just constantly talking about, you know, saving the world or making the world a better place.
I feel you. Awesome. There we go. I think that wraps up this second episode. Right before we sign off, you raised a round recently. Are you hiring, or is there anything else you'd like to plug?
Yeah, we're hiring. Best thing to do is go to our website and click careers. We have a Notion page that like lays out everything we're doing, including like the jumpsuit, the train rides through the desert, and all of those other highly mission aligned kind of things that we're doing. And then I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Prof Dumpster, P-R-O-F, short for Professor Dumpster, and then Jupe's on Twitter and Instagram at Jupe Inc.
Awesome. There you go, folks. Check out Jupe at jupe.com. Really simple, Jupe. Love the domain. And check out Jeff on Twitter as well. I think that wraps up today's episode. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on once again.
Yeah, great being here. Good to see you.
Awesome. All right, folks. We'll see you next time on the Breakouts. You have a good one. Bye-bye. All right, and that wraps up today's episode. We really hope you enjoyed it. Now, just before I let you go, I wanted to reiterate one thing. We're trying to build the best podcast out there for aspiring entrepreneurs, and to do that, we need your help. The best way you can help us is by joining our Discord community. The link is in the description below, and then leaving us feedback. Tell us how we did. Tell us how we can improve. We're eagerly waiting to hear from you. Other than that, show us some love and follow us on Twitter at The Breakouts Pod. And I think that's everything I have for you. We'll see you next time on The Breakouts.